Now, I'm not going to give you investment advice. The idea in this course wasn't really to give people investment advice. We can do that on another course, but I want to give you a bit of an insight. Over the last 15 years, the export of Bordeaux wines in the UK, in the United States, and in China has grown dramatically. We were lucky enough in Bordeaux to have some wonderful vintages in the year 2000s, so 2005 and 2009 in particular, were fantastic vintages. So was 2010, and there was a lot of speculation on those wines. Prices grew, and we're really seeing these top wines become a real commodity, a bit like you would see on the stock exchange, on equity or on any kind of stock. These wines are being traded, they're being bought en primeur, resold, rebought, that we couldn't have between the time that it's been the en primeur has been released, so you get some paperwork saying you own this wine. The wine could have changed hands 10 times. It's still in the estate's cellar, hasn't been bottled yet, and it's changed hands many times. So there's a lot of trade and speculation being done on those wines before they're even released in bottle and afterwards in bottles. It has to be said that when you look at the increase in prices in a lot of those top wines, there's some very interesting investments to be made. And today there's even, if you want to go and have a look, there's a website I recommend that you have a look at. It's called LiveX, and it's going to give you the value, the professional value, if you wish, of each one of the Grand Cru Classés, day per day, the curves, a bit like you would see when you're looking at financial news of the stock market. You're going to see what the price of the day is for Château Lafite Rothschild, for Château Margaux, for Petrus, and other wines from the Bordeaux region. So it's a good place to go and look. Personally, I think that the real interest in when investing is getting access to the top tier of Grand Cru Classé, so first and second growth. That's where there is a bit more security. You can trade on third, fourth, and fifth growths, but it's difficult. You're going to need a lot of knowledge, a lot of work to follow these price curves and understand them well. You're going to need knowledge of the vintages, understanding of how they could evolve, and there are very many different aspects happening there. So I recommend for less risky investments, definitely first and second growth, definitely on the better vintages, at least the good vintages and the exceptional vintages. The difficulty afterwards is getting access to those wines, because as you can imagine, everybody wants those wines. It's getting access, and that works by having a good relationship with the right people, being there at the right time, and following trends and being able to buy some other wines. So definitely I would recommend for investment only buying on the top vintages in the top chateaus. I think that is where the security is. Obviously, if you want to invest in wine, and if that's an interest, by all means, you can email us. We'll put you in touch with people who are professionals, the top professionals at that, who do this day in, day out, and who can help you. In the beginning, I would definitely recommend that you work with people helping you out in this type of investment. So now we're going to look at the consumption of Bordeaux wines. We're going to look at how to buy wines that are meant for consumption. And for me, I look at this in two main ways. I look at young wines and old wines. As I said, Bordeaux is very often made to be drunk with a bit of age. So buying a young Bordeaux, you should do so with in mind storing the wine, aging it, getting it to mature, or you're going to be drinking these wines young. If you're going to be drinking these wines young, I would definitely not recommend that you drink anything, any of the big Médocs or the big Saint-Émilion or Pomerol. I don't think they're made at all to be drunk young. I think that the real opportunities are going to be on the Côte de Bordeaux. We discussed it, a lot of value for money in those wines. And they're wines that are ready to be enjoyed much younger. Now, for if you're going to be buying young wines of the Médoc, the big wines of the Libournais, I would definitely recommend that you store them. Now, whether you store them at home or you use a storage service, that really doesn't matter. If you're storing them at home, you've got to have a wine cellar or a wine fridge keeping the wine at the correct temperature. Otherwise, if the wine is at the wrong temperature, it's going to heat up. You're basically going to kill your wine. If it's too humid in your house, that's going to damage. If it's too dry, the cork is going to dry out. It's going to let in air. It's going to accelerate, which is going to accelerate the aging. So I would definitely store wine using the correct conditions. So you've got to have a wine fridge or a cellar that's at a constant temperature, at a cool temperature, so that the wines don't suffer, and where you have the right level of humidity. So when buying young wines of the great estates, one thing I like to do is to buy them in the less good vintages. Now, if you can afford the great wines in the very best vintages and you can afford to buy them and consume them on a regular basis, then by all means it's something to do. But if you're looking for little tips and tricks on how to enjoy those wines, I would definitely enjoy those wines in the lesser vintages where the value is going to be much more approachable, but nonetheless they're going to be superb wines. Because I told you, yes, there is a big vintage influence, but these great chateaus have the means in wet vintages, in cold vintages, to heat up the vineyard. They have the firepower of people to go and tend the vineyards more than other estates. So you will get the days of real bad vintages are all but gone for that level of wine. So I think that it's a great trick is to buy top chateaus in the poor vintages. And if you're buying young wines to age, then I would buy from the very good vintages. I would buy either the Cru Bourgeois or some top Saint-Émilion, Médoc, all the Cru Bourgeois, as I said, some fifth growth Grand Crus, which can be more affordable. Definitely in those vintages, they'll still come at a hefty price, but you can get some lovely, lovely wines from the Médoc, from Saint-Émilion in the very good vintages without having to pay Chateau Margaux kinds of prices. Now, if you're buying old wines, the question there is going to be where to buy them. There are some marketplaces where you can get access to old wines that have been either kept in some individuals' homes or restaurants. Now, the problem with that is you have to check that the wine was stored in correct conditions, because you could be buying wine that's completely basically dead. So it's something you need to be careful of. Another good place to buy Old Bordeaux is going to be on auction. So you can get access to auctions such as Christie's, Sotheby's online. You can buy some old Bordeaux at very interesting prices. You need to be at the right auction at the right time, and you can get some really interesting wine with a bit of age. Otherwise, going to your independent wine merchant who stored wines. There are some around, I think in London here, definitely of Berry Brothers, which is historically a merchant that has an unbelievable expertise in Old Bordeaux. So, but you have to realize that you're going to be paying a price. Someone has had to buy that wine, store that money if you wish, and they're going to have to make a profit, because that's what they do. They're going to have to make a living from it. So you're going to have to pay that premium. And that's basically it with wine. Either you put the money up front early, you store the wine, keep the wine, and you get to enjoy old wines, or you pay a premium and you get to enjoy old wines. But someone has to pay for those old wines. But I can assure you it's worth it. Really is worth it. Drinking old wine, and especially these top wines from Bordeaux, is definitely a fantastic experience. Now, if you're going to be drinking young wines of the Côte de Bordeaux, of the Entre-deux-Mers, red wines, as much as white wines, because a lot of the white wines are made for aging, and even if they're not, even if they're made to be drunk in their youth, I recommend decanting those wines. Now, decanting those wines has a couple of advantages. The first one is going to be that a white wine that's taken out the fridge, it's going to bring its temperature up by a couple of degrees, and it's really going to open up the wine. This oxygen that you're going to bring to the red wine or the white wine is going to open up the wine. It's going to make the aromas more, it's going to give them more amplitude, it's going to give them more expression, and it's going to give them more precision. The advantage it has of decanting a red wine, especially in its youth, is that it mellows the tannins a little bit, and it gives the wine a bit more of a bit of a thicker texture. So when you're drinking these wines young, definitely decant the reds and the whites. And the younger, the bigger the decanter you're going to need. And don't be afraid for the red wines to keep them in the fridge. Open them, decant them, give them a couple of degrees. So after having kept them in the fridge for a couple of hours, to bring the temperature down, not to have them too hot. Decant them, and for an hour, the temperature is going to come back up just below room temperature. So you need to have them for these young wines at around 15-16 degrees Celsius is going to be very good. So if you're coming up from say 7 degrees, 8 degrees, it's going to be at the right temperature if it's in a decanter. And the same for the white wines. Don't hesitate to have a big decanter, so really it takes in a maximum air and you get maximum enjoyment for your wine. Now, for old wines, I would be very careful with decanting. So the idea with decanting old wines was these Bordeaux wines are going to have sediments. They're going to have a depot at the bottom of the bottle. And the idea, typically you would have a decanter, a candle just under the neck of the bottle, and you would be decanting that wine until you reached this sediment that you have, so that you don't drink the sediment, and you put the bottle down. If you're doing that with old red wine, I would definitely recommend one little technique that I do is I open my old wine, I serve a tiny bit into the glass. I first of all, before I swirl, I smell. Then I'm going to swirl my wine. I smell again. If that second nose, the second time I smell, the time after which I've aerated my wine, I smell and I feel that the level of the nose is less intense than the first nose. So that I smell, okay, we're going to have aromas coming up. I swirl the wine. I go back to smell again. If that's less intense than the first nose, I would definitely decant only right before service, and I would only use a very small decanter, a carafe, just basically to technically not have the sediment, the deposit in the glasses that you're going to be serving. If the first nose and the second nose are equal, you can use a normal decanter, but don't go and use these old decanters, because these old wines can be very fragile and they can just basically fall apart and go within 10 minutes of you opening them. You'll have no pleasure from the wine, because they're basically going to kill it, too much oxygen. So use small decanters for the old red wines. Also for the old white wines, I would also use small carafes, but you don't have to, because you're not going to have the depot. Having it at the right temperature, the deposit, having it at the right temperature is important during service, and it's going to open up in the glass. So serve small glasses to have maximum ratio of air to wine, and that will, the temperature in a glass of wine, if you're not serving the glasses too big, goes up by about 1 degree Celsius every 5 minutes. So if you serve the glass 5 minutes before, that 1 degree increase is really going to improve the wine.